My name is Santiago Forbes.
Hi, it's Kaina.
Hello, I'm Cassandra Forbes.
Hi, my name's Yesenia Morales, but now it's Forbes because I've got me.
Hello, I'm Kaina, and I'm being interviewed for Express Yourself podcast.
So, Kaina, how old are you?
I am 24 years old.
What is your experience with this, having a parent who is incarcerated?
A little iffy. You get, if they're a good parent when they're out, you get, all the good parenting, and then, they're gone for, months to a year. It just kind of like disappears, doesn't happen, and then, it's like a roller coaster kind of with, the parenting, and then they're not, the parenting, and then they're not.
So the absenteeism is something that is, it makes it very inconsistent.
Yes, very inconsistent. Because, even, if you go visit them while they are like incarcerated and all that, you don't get to do what you did when they were out. Like, you can't, just wake up and, go bother them in their room, or, have breakfast with them in the morning, or, do weekend activities and whatnot. And, like in the visiting room, you can barely even touch them. So.
Which one of your parents is incarcerated?
My stepfather is incarcerated.
And how long has your stepfather been incarcerated?
The whole time I've known him, on and off.
How long have you known him?
Since I was 5, so almost 20 years.
So he's been incarcerated on and off since you've known him, since he came into your life?
Yes.
Okay.
So almost 20 years he's been in and out.
And how has this affected you?
Since my, biological father wasn't in the picture either. It was just mostly, my mom and me and my siblings. So, what a lot of people don't take into account, no matter what sex the child is, having both parents, they don't have to be together, but like having both parents in your life is pretty important. You can, kind of like realize, for a girl, it kind of goes into, your later life and how you deal with, the opposite sex and all that. How you're supposed to be treated and stuff like that.
So do you think that because of that, well, let me rephrase that. So your stepfather was filling the shoes of your biological father.
Yeah.
And then in the time of him filling in the shoes of your biological father, he was in and out of incarceration. Yeah. So he did but didn't fill those shoes for you.
Yes. So
was it confusing that he came in, had this strong presence, and then was gone?
It could be at times, but since I met him when I was 5, and by the time, it really started, going up and down, I, kind of understood what was going on, because I was a little bit older. So I understood that, he did something bad, so he had to do, his time for it. So it wasn't really that confusing until, later in life, I would say. You're kind of like floundering a little bit when it comes to, dealing with other people. I didn't know how guys were supposed to act, in certain parts of my life. So,
So it was a void.
Yeah.
Why do you think that this podcast is important?
From what I've gathered and what I've talked about, with, other people, there's not really a podcast like this out there. And I've known there's like support groups for, the women who are with men that are incarcerated. I don't know if from my knowledge, I haven't heard about any support group for the children, or anything talking about how this affects the children who have parents that are incarcerated. A lot of people just kind of focus on, the women or men that are with people who are incarcerated.
So you think that this platform will provide a voice for children, because from what I'm getting from you, they aren't really considered. The adults are considered, but the children, who it appears it has the biggest effect on, are not being considered. So you would say that this is important because it gives children a voice.
Yeah, because, a lot of people don't realize that, just because, a kid can't articulate, on the same level as you, doesn't mean they don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
you know, they just use smaller words or, you know, a more childish way of explaining what is going on. But, you know, they're aware that, you know, their parent is going in and out. They're aware that their parent isn't there. And, you know, a lot of people don't take that into account. So, yeah.
So what would you say is the worst thing about growing up in this situation with an incarcerated parent?
Probably the worst thing would have to be, you know, pretty much, even though they were, my mom and, you know, my stepdad were together, but they weren't at the same time. So pretty much my mom was a single parent my whole life.
Because your biological father was absentee.
Yes.
And then your mother got into this relationship with your stepfather.
And he was in and out of prison, so he wasn't there.
So, although they were together and married, it was still your mom being a single mom, taking care of everything.
She was there every day, you know, on the weekends, you know, when you wake up to have, you know, breakfast with your parents, it was just her.
Why do you think why do you think this isn't discussed in society? Like, why do you think that it's not something that is in the forefront?
Because, like I said, a lot of people, you know, when they feel that when people kind of simplify things, they're not as articulate as they are. So, like I said, they believe, you know, because a 6-year-old can't, you know, say incarcerated properly, that they don't know what's going on. I'm sorry, the kid knows what's going on. You know, if they go to visit their parent, they're aware that, you know, they have to go up to this, you know, giant cage of a place. You know, they know aware that they have to, you know, wear certain colors. They're aware that, you know, they're being searched. Their stuff is going through a metal detector. They're going through a metal detector. They're aware that they can't touch their father as much. They have to eat crappy food. And they're aware that, you know, that there's people watching them, you know, while they're visiting their father or mother while they're incarcerated. And just because, you know, like I said, a kid can't say incarceration, you know, they're aware that their parent is incarcerated. So it's just, you know, a lot of people feel like, you know, since they're a kid, you know, they can't, you know, understand it. But what a lot of people don't realize is that, you know, about 3 or 4, you know, kids really start to understand their surroundings. They might not be able to say a lot about what is going on, but they understand what's going on.
Who do you think something like this... Wait, sorry. Can you edit that out?
No.
Who would you think this is something that needs to be discussed? Like, who needs to discuss it? Like, what needs to be addressed? I guess I should say it that way.
I think everything needs to be addressed. You know, a lot of people are kind of realize that so most of the effects that happened with kids that have parents incarcerated don't really show a lot until they're like in their teenage years, like when their emotions start going up and down and all that. You know, a lot of kids, you know, develop anger issues. They can become depressed because of this. A lot of people have, you know, quote unquote daddy issues from this, or mommy issues, or both, unfortunately, for some kids. So it's just like, you know, you kind of, you know, you should address it as soon as possible instead of when it, you know, becomes, you know, an actual problem. Because that's what a lot of people do. They're like, oh, I'm fine. And then once it becomes an issue, then they try to do something. People need to be proactive and say something and start dealing with the issue before it becomes an actual issue.
So you think this podcast will allow children to understand that they're not alone?
Yes. And
perhaps it will allow adults to see that although they believe children are not in tune always with what's going on, this will help them to understand that children are more in tune than adults may think.
Yes, very much so.
Do you think that children should go to the prison and visit their parent?
Yes.
Frequently?
I wouldn't say frequently, but, you know, at least once a month if that's allowed. Because I know, you know, some of the stuff has changed and, you know, some prisons have different things set up. But I believe that, you know, yes, going to a prison period, you know, for anybody from, you know, the adult visiting to the kid visiting, it's a little traumatizing type of situation to go through all the time. but it's better to visit them instead, and like know who they are as a person, instead of like kind of like not visiting them not at all, and not knowing who they are at all, and then they get out and they're like, hey, I'm your dad, or hey, I'm your mom, like, we're gonna do this now. Like, going to visit helps establish a relationship with the person who is incarcerated.
So it's my understanding that your stepfather was what's considered a rolling stone and happens to have several children with several different women.
Yes.
Do you think that this is something that affects the children? One, by having a parent who's incarcerated, and two, because there are children spread around, the children don't really get to know each other because the parent that they have in common is gone. Do you think that that's something that needs to be looked at, discussed, considered?
Yes, because whether a person is incarcerated or not, there's plenty of men who have a lot of kids, and besides the whole prison thing, having a whole bunch of kids and then not telling them about each other, but not ever like bringing them together could cause an issue, because there's like, you're like, okay, I know there's this kid out there that I'm related to, and like kids, they don't forget that stuff, and people don't forget that stuff, and they're like, I wonder what this person is like, and maybe they could help each other out in some type of way, whether it's emotionally, or sometimes monetarily, and sometimes physically, so it's like, it's having that common thing can actually be a lot of help. Because what if one of the kids is kind of like floundering, their situation is not the best, and they don't have any support, but they know about these people that could have supported them, but they don't know them because their common parent isn't there to bring them together.
So you think that your stepfather being a rolling stone, for to put it nicely,
yeah,
and having all these children, and then you guys not knowing each other, you think that is something that, I don't want to say detrimental, but has it had a negative impact? Because how many children does your stepfather have?
Ones that are of
his
loins. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I believe 6.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 7, and then he has me, who he has claimed, and another kid who's like a year or two older than me that he has claimed. So he has 6 that are for sure, we know, that are like from his loins, and then he adopted 2, so that's about 8 kids that know about each other, and a couple of them know each other, but since there was no actual like sit down, everybody get together, what's going on, it's kind of like just like kind of like thrown in there.
Throwing everybody together.
Yeah, there's no structure to any of the relationships. So it's like kind of like, just, a whole bunch of kids that know about each other. And, like the example I gave, about, one kid, having the short end of the stick, they don't have any support from anybody else. So they're kind of like floundering on their own, and they know about all these people, but they don't have any support from them.
So my understanding is that you and your siblings left the common area where the rest of the siblings are growing up. Do you think that was not such a good idea? Do you think it was a good idea? Maybe it could have went differently, so that you guys could have been around your siblings more?
I think it could have gone differently. I understand why we left. That was, between, my mom and, my stepdad, that was, they had issues. So, my mom felt like she needed to leave, but that could have been done differently because, my mom was kind of like the main person, like the kind of like the head of it, because, my stepdad, had 2 kids with her. So, as I've learned that, men who have multiple kids with multiple women, if they have more than one kid with one woman, that's generally the person who they're going to go back to. So that makes that person a little more important when it comes to the hierarchy of all the other women. But like all the other kids, used to come over to our house, and that was kind of like us being together. And so since that kind of got cut off and didn't happen, it kind of a little bit of the bonds fell apart.
So you think it could have been handled differently so that you guys could have the relationships that you would desire, I guess, with your other siblings?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that these things can be remedied? And when I say remedied, I'm saying, the relationships that weren't built in the beginning, can you now build some with your siblings? The relationship that wasn't built with your stepfather that you started, or your other siblings, can they rebuild? Do you think that that's possible?
I think that is a possibility, but all the parties have to be willing to let it build. So as much as one person would want to have a relationship with somebody, if the other person that they're trying to have a relationship with isn't trying to have that relationship, it's not going to work. So if only if the people who want to have a relationship with each other, if they both are
if all parties are willing,
and put effort, because any relationship, it's not a one-way street. It's a give and take. So you can't just have one person giving and the other person taking, but not giving anything back. So all parties have to be willing to participate to actually build some type of relationship.
Since you're the oldest, do you see any adverse effects that it's had on your younger siblings that you grew up in the house with?
Yeah. People, have anger issues, and, other people don't, know how to socialize that well. So, it has, some effects. Myself, I'm not very social. So, when I was younger, the person to take me out and have me do stuff was my stepdad. But since, he had the issues with my mom and, the in and out of incarceration thing, I kind of, after all that, I was just like, whatever. Now it's not a bad thing, but it's not the best either.
Do you think that you can get out of that and be more social? Of course, you're always going to have some type of, I don't want to say trust issue, but you're going to be hesitant. But do you think that that's something that you can overcome?
Yes. I started to overcome it a couple of years ago. You just have to get into the right environment. What happened with me is that I got this job doing inventory, and I was out the house a lot, so I wasn't I couldn't just stay at home. I had to leave. So having to leave, and all these other people around me that were leaving with me, they're like, oh, let's do this and let's do that, and so that helped me a lot.
Excuse me. So that helped you to learn how to socialize. How much longer does your stepfather, if he's still incarcerated, how much longer will your stepfather be incarcerated?
From what I understand, it's about 5 years and some change.
Do you plan on working on your relationship with your stepfather while he's incarcerated, so that when he gets out, you guys have the type of relationship that you would like?
Yeah, I mean, our relationship will never be how I would like, because he was absent for so long, even when my parents were together. So it will never be how, probably either of us would like, but, we can do something with it.
Do you think you can make the best of what it is?
Yes.
Are you looking forward to that?
Yeah. I mean, besides being incarcerated and all that, he's a good father.
Do you think that he will help build bridges between you, your brother and sister that you grew up with, and your siblings that he had outside of your parents' marriage?
Yeah, I kind of believe that's one of his goals. He can't do anything really, because he's incarcerated right now. But, I have a feeling that once he gets out, he wants, all of his kids to get together and, on a regular basis. I don't know on how frequent, but, on a regular basis, he wants, all 8 of us to get together and, kind of make some type of bond.
Are you looking forward to him getting out and then being able to build on what you guys already have?
Yeah. like I said, you know, besides the incarceration thing, he was a really good father.
Is there anything else you would like to say, point out, discuss?
Not at this moment that I can think of off the top of my head.
If you could tell your younger self anything from what you've experienced going through this with your stepfather, with your own father, with your mom and your brothers and sisters, what would you tell her?
Try to actually make friends. Because, you know, one thing that I did learn after, you know, I went through everything was that, you know, even though you don't have to have a whole bunch of friends, but having, you know, at least a couple that, you know, you can get out of the house with and, you know, kind of like woo-saw, actually, you know, helps a lot. Because it's not like forget what's going on at home, but to kind of like have, you know, a break from
to
it.
step away.
Yeah,
to have
to step
a
away.
group of people that you can go and hang out with to step away from what is your reality.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I think everyone needs a break from their reality in order to grow.
Yes.
If you had a choice, I mean, you can't change the past. Hindsight's 20/20. If you had a choice, do you wish that your mom or your stepdad could have done something different?
There's a lot of shoulda, coulda, wouldas. You know, when it came down to it, you know, my stepdad could have kind of like pulled back from, you know, his extracurricular activities, you know, because he had, like, before that, before his last, you know, well, his incarceration now, it's been a couple years, you know, he had, 6 kids already, or 7, and, you know, he had all these kids already, and he had a relationship with, you know, my mother and all that, and, you know, he had some good things going and stuff like that, and so he could have, you know, stopped that, you know, my mom could have spoken up about, you know, some of the issues that she had, you know, people, you know, they weren't ready for it then. They were still kind of young, you know, they were coming out of, you know, their respective, you know, shells of who they were as those people back then.
So, what would you like people to know about this process, this situation, this podcast?
This podcast is a platform, you know, for, you know, kids who have parents incarcerated, whether it's 1 or 2, even if it's not actually, I wouldn't say parent, if a guardian, the person taking care of you is incarcerated in any type of way, you know, whether it's, you know, prison or jail, you know, this is a platform for them to say anything, you know, if they would like to be interviewed, to get it off their chest, if they, you know, and, you know, even if they don't want to videotape the interview, we are, you know, here, you know, as a platform to help.
So in closing, tell us what is to come.
To come, you know, we're just gonna, you know, be interviewing, you know, other kids who have parents who are incarcerated, and, you know, in our area, if, you know, other kids, you know, in the surrounding area, you know, want to do it, we are a mobile podcast, so we will come to you if necessary, and you can say your piece. Like I said, whether it's, you know, actually interviewed, or if, you know, you just want to, you know, have somebody to talk to, we're here for that.
Well, Kaina, it was a pleasure having you, and we look forward to seeing you, and see you soon.
Deuces.
Chop, chop.
Chop, chop.